Princess Lyra had been flying through the void of space for 3 days when the Krell warships found her. Her small scout vessel was fast, but it was no match for the battle cruisers that suddenly appeared from hyperspace. The twin dragons Ember and Frost were curled in the cargo hold sleeping. After days of travel, when the first blast hit the ship's shields, the princess grabbed the controls and pushed the engines to maximum power. Her silver hands flew across the holographic displays as she tried to calculate an escape route. Behind her, the Krell ships were gaining ground, their weapons charging for another volley. She had to find somewhere to hide, and fast. That was when she saw it, a small blue and green planet in a yellow star system. According to her navigation computer, it was called Earth, and it was home to a species called humans. The galactic database had very little information about them. They were considered primitive and had not yet developed faster than light travel. Most advanced species ignored them completely. Lyra made her decision in seconds. She aimed her ship toward Earth and activated the emergency jump drive. The Krell fired again, and this time their weapons tore through her shields and ripped into the hull. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems began failing one by one. Ember and Frost woke up with roars of alarm, their scales glowing with agitation. The jump drive engaged just as another blast struck the engine core. The ship lurched into hyperspace, but the damage was catastrophic. They would not make it far. Lyra held on to the controls as the vessel shook violently around her. Through the viewport, she could see Earth growing larger as they dropped out of hyperspace right above the planet's atmosphere. Smoke filled the cockpit as the ship began its uncontrolled descent. The princess activated the emergency life support systems and sealed herself in the command chair. Ember and Frost pressed against the walls of the cargo hold, their eyes wide with fear. They had survived battles and wars, but this was different. This was a crash, and there was nothing they could do except trust their mistress to save them. The ship hit the atmosphere like a meteor. Flames engulfed the hull as friction tore away the outer plating. Lyra fought to maintain some control, but the steering was completely gone. All she could do was try to slow their descent and pray they did not hit a populated area. She did not want to harm the primitive inhabitants of this world. Through the smoke and flame, she caught glimpses of the surface below. Mountains covered in green vegetation, rivers cutting through valleys, and vast empty spaces with no signs of civilization. She aimed for one of those empty areas and braced for impact. The ship crashed through a forest of tall trees and slammed into the ground with tremendous force. Metal screamed and tore as the vessel plowed through dirt and rock for nearly a mile before finally coming to rest in a clearing. The impact threw Lyra against her restraints hard enough to crack 2 of her ribs. Pain exploded through her chest and she gasped for air. But that was not the worst of it. During the crash, something had struck her side. A piece of debris, or perhaps a jagged edge of torn metal. When she looked down, she saw blood. Her royal blue blood was flowing from a deep wound just below her ribcage. But it was not just blood. Mixed with the blue was something black and oily. Her breath caught in her throat as realization hit her. The Krell had not just been firing regular weapons. They had used poison rounds. Assassination weapons designed specifically to kill members of the royal bloodline. The black substance was a toxin created from rare crystals found only in the death nebulas of the outer rim. It was slow-acting but completely fatal. Once it entered the bloodstream, there was no cure. Lyra tried to stand, but her legs would not support her. She collapsed against the command console and triggered the cargo hold release. The doors hissed open and Ember and Frost burst out. The 2 dragons immediately rushed to their mistress, their eyes glowing with concern and rage. Ember was the male dragon covered in scales that shimmered red and orange like living flames. He could breathe fire hot enough to melt steel, and his temper matched his element. Frost was the female, her scales a brilliant white and blue like ice crystals. She could freeze anything with her breath and create barriers of solid ice. Together they had protected Lyra since they were hatchlings and she was just a young princess. Now they pressed their massive heads against her, trying to help but not knowing how. Lyra reached out with trembling hands and touched their faces. She spoke to them in the ancient language of her people, telling them it was not their fault, telling them she loved them, telling them goodbye. The dragons roared in defiance. They would not accept this. Ember tried to use his flames to cauterize the wound, but the poison had already spread too far. Frost tried to freeze the area to slow the toxin, but it continued spreading through Lyra's veins. Nothing they did made any difference. The princess knew she had maybe an hour left. The poison was designed to be slow enough that the victim would suffer, but fast enough that no help could arrive in time. It was a cruel weapon favored by Krell assassins. She had seen it used on her father during the war. She had watched him die in agony as the toxin shut down his organs one by one. She would not let that happen here. She would not let these loyal creatures watch her die that way. With the last of her strength, she ordered Ember and Frost to fly away to save themselves. But the dragons refused. They stayed by her side, their eyes never leaving her face. Lyra felt herself growing weaker. The world around her was starting to blur. Her silver skin was turning gray as the poison spread. She could feel her heart beating slower with each passing moment. This was the end of the Silver Moon dynasty. The last princess would die alone on a primitive planet far from home. She closed her eyes and waited for death to claim her. But death did not come. Instead, she heard footsteps. Heavy boots crunching through the underbrush. A voice calling out in a language she did not understand. She forced her eyes open and saw a figure approaching through the trees. It was a human male. He was tall and strongly built with short dark hair and weathered skin. He wore simple clothing made of rough fabric and carried a pack on his back. In his hands was some kind of primitive container. When he saw the crashed ship and the dragons, his eyes went wide with shock. Ember immediately took flight and dove toward the human, his jaws opening to release a stream of fire. But Lyra raised her hand and spoke a command. Her voice was weak, but the dragon obeyed. He pulled back at the last second and hovered above them, watching the human with burning eyes ready to strike if he made any threatening move. The human slowly approached with his hands raised. He was saying something in that strange language, but his tone was calm and reassuring. When he knelt beside Lyra and saw her wound, his expression changed. The shock was replaced by determination. He opened his container and began pulling out items that looked like medical supplies. Lyra tried to speak to warn him that it was hopeless, but no words came out. She could only watch as this primitive human began working on her wound with surprising skill and efficiency. His hands moved with confidence as he examined the injury and started treating it. As darkness closed in around her vision, Lyra had one final thought. Perhaps the ancient texts had been right. Perhaps there was something special about these humans after all. Jake Murphy had been living alone in the Montana wilderness for 2 years. After 12 years as a combat medic in the military, he had seen enough blood and death to last several lifetimes. When his final tour ended, he took his savings and bought a small cabin 3 miles from the nearest road. He wanted peace. He wanted quiet. He wanted to forget the faces of all the soldiers he could not save. But old habits died hard. He still kept his medical kit fully stocked. He still woke up at dawn, and when he heard that explosion echo through the valley, his instincts kicked in before his brain could tell him to stay away. Now he was kneeling beside something that should not exist. A woman with silver skin and pointed ears bleeding blue blood. 2 massive dragons circling overhead ready to kill him if he made one wrong move. His rational mind was screaming that this was impossible, but his medic training was louder. Someone was dying and he had the skills to help. Jake examined the wound with practiced efficiency. Deep puncture approximately 3 inches below the rib cage. Significant blood loss. But there was something else. That black substance mixed with the blue blood. It looked like oil, but it was moving on its own, flowing through her veins like it was alive. Poison. He had seen enough chemical weapons during his service to recognize a toxin. When he saw one, the woman's vital signs were deteriorating rapidly. Her pulse was weak and thready. Her breathing was shallow and labored. Her skin was turning from silver to gray. She had maybe 30 minutes left if he was lucky. Maybe less. He pulled out his trauma kit and went to work. First, he needed to stop the bleeding. He applied pressure to the wound while using his other hand to prepare a field dressing. The blue blood was slick and strange, but blood was blood. The principles were the same. The fire dragon dove toward him again with a screech of rage. Jake did not even look up. He kept working on the wound while speaking in a calm, steady voice. Easy there, big guy. I am trying to help her. I know you do not understand me, but I need you to back off and let me work. Something in his tone must have gotten through because the dragon pulled back. It landed a few feet away and watched him with eyes that burned like molten lava. The ice dragon landed on the other side, also watching. Jake could feel their stares boring into him. One wrong move and he would be either incinerated or frozen solid. He finished packing the wound to slow the bleeding, then turned his attention to the poison. This was the real problem. He had seen toxins before, but nothing like this. It was spreading through her system too fast. He needed to extract as much of it as possible before it reached her heart. Jake pulled out a syringe and carefully inserted it near the wound. He drew back the plunger and watched as the black substance flowed into the chamber. It took 3 syringes to remove most of the visible poison from the immediate area. He disposed of each one carefully in a sealed container. Whatever this stuff was, he did not want it touching his skin. But the poison had already spread beyond the wound site. He could see dark veins creeping up toward her chest. He needed to slow it down. He needed to buy time for her body to fight back. That was when he got an idea. It was crazy, but he was out of options. He looked at the fire dragon and then at the ice dragon. Heat could speed up circulation, but cold could slow it down. If he could cool the area around her heart, it might slow the poison's progress. Jake pointed at the ice dragon and then at the woman. He made a gesture like he was blowing out air, then pointed at her chest. "Come on, girl. I need your help here. Can you give me some of that ice breath? Just a little bit right here?" The ice dragon tilted her head and made a sound like wind chimes. She looked at her mistress, then back at Jake. He repeated the gesture. "Please. I am trying to save her." Frost stepped forward cautiously. She lowered her massive head until it was inches from Lyra's chest. Then she exhaled gently. A stream of freezing mist flowed from her nostrils and covered the princess's upper body. Jake watched as frost formed on her silver skin. He placed his hand near the area to monitor the temperature. Not too much. Just enough to slow things down. After a few seconds, he held up his hand. "Okay, that is good. Stop." Frost pulled back and Jake checked Lyra's pulse again. It was still weak, but it had stabilized slightly. The gray color had stopped spreading. The cold was slowing the poison's progress. It was working, but he was not done yet. The wound still needed to be properly cleaned and closed. He pulled out antiseptic and carefully cleaned the area around the puncture. The blue blood had slowed to a trickle. Good sign. Then he prepared a suture kit. This was going to be tricky. He had never sewn up silver skin before, and he had no idea if her biology was similar enough to human anatomy for his techniques to work. But he had to try. Jake threaded the needle and began closing the wound with small, precise stitches. His hands were steady despite the absurdity of the situation, despite the dragons watching his every move, despite the fact that he was performing field surgery on an alien princess. As he worked, he talked to her. He did not know if she could hear him, but it helped him stay focused. "You are going to be okay. I have seen worse than this." "Well, actually, I have not seen anything quite like this. But the principle is the same. Stop the bleeding. Remove the poison. Give the body time to heal. You have got a strong heartbeat. That is good. Just keep fighting." Jake finished the sutures and wrapped the wound with clean bandages. Then he turned his attention to the smaller cuts and burns she had sustained in the crash. He treated each one methodically, applied antibiotic ointment, covered them with sterile dressings, checked her vitals again. Her pulse was getting stronger. Her breathing was deeper. The gray color was starting to recede from her skin. Against all odds, she was stabilizing. The fire dragon moved closer and sniffed at the bandages. Jake held his breath, expecting to be roasted alive. But Ember just made a rumbling sound deep in his chest and stepped back. It was almost like approval. Jake sat back on his heels and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He had done everything he could. Now it was up to her body to do the rest. He pulled out a canteen from his pack and took a long drink of water. His hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline crash. The reality of what had just happened was starting to sink in. He had just saved an alien's life. An alien princess with pet dragons. This was either the craziest day of his life, or he had finally lost his mind and was hallucinating in his cabin. The woman stirred slightly and made a small sound. Jake immediately leaned forward to check on her. Her eyes opened slowly. They were a brilliant violet color that seemed to glow with inner light. She looked at him and her lips moved, but no sound came out. "Rest," Jake said gently. "Do not try to talk yet. You lost a lot of blood. You need to save your strength." She reached up with one trembling hand and touched his face. Her fingers were cool against his skin. Then she spoke a single word in a language he did not understand. But somehow he knew what she meant. "Thank you," Jake smiled. "You are welcome. Now let's get you somewhere safe." Princess Lyra woke up in a strange place. The ceiling above her was made of rough wood beams and the walls were constructed from logs. Sunlight streamed through a small window, casting shadows across the simple room. She was lying on a soft surface covered with thick fabric. A bed, the human called it. Her wound throbbed with a dull ache, but the poison was gone. She could feel it. Her body was healing. The door opened and the human entered carrying a tray. Jake Murphy. She had learned his name during brief moments of consciousness over the past day. He had carried her to this dwelling despite her weight, and the dragons following overhead. He had tended to her wounds and given her water. He had saved her life. "Hey, you are awake," Jake said with a smile. "How are you feeling?" Lyra's translation implant had finally activated after her body recovered enough energy. She could now understand his words better. She replied. Her voice was weak but clear. "The poison is gone. You saved my life, human." Jake set the tray down on a small table beside the bed. "Just Jake is fine. And yeah, well, that is kind of what I do. Used to do anyway." He pulled up a chair and sat down. "I made some soup. I do not know what your people eat, but this is pretty basic. Chicken, vegetables, and broth. Think you can manage some?" Lyra nodded and slowly sat up. Pain shot through her side, but she pushed it aside. She had endured worse during the war. Jake helped support her back with pillows, then handed her the bowl. The smell was strange but not unpleasant. She took a careful sip and found it surprisingly good. As she ate, Jake explained where they were. His cabin in the Montana wilderness, 3 miles from the nearest road. No neighbors, no internet connection, just him in the forest. It was the perfect place to hide while she recovered. Ember and Frost were outside. Jake had set up a makeshift shelter for them near the cabin. The dragons were too large to fit inside, so they stayed close guarding the area. Jake brought them food. Deer he had hunted and fish from a nearby stream. The dragons accepted his offerings, though Ember still watched him with suspicion. After Lyra finished eating, she told Jake her story. She explained about the Silvermoon Elves and their war with the Krell Empire. She told him about the genocide of her people, about the assassination of her father, the king, about her desperate flight across the galaxy to find help. Jake listened without interrupting. His face grew darker as she described the atrocities committed by the Krell. The entire world's burned. The billions killed. The refugees scattered across space with nowhere to go. "So you came here looking for allies," Jake said when she finished. "To Earth. But we are not exactly a spacefaring species yet. Most people do not even know aliens exist. What kind of help were you hoping to find?" Lyra looked out the window at the trees beyond. "I read the ancient texts. Before your people developed modern technology, they were warriors, survivors. They fought against impossible odds and won. They protected the weak and stood against tyrants. I thought perhaps that spirit still existed, that humans would help refugees in need." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "You came all this way based on old stories? Sometimes old stories are all we have left," Lyra said softly. Jake stood and walked to the window. Outside he could see Ember and Frost resting in the clearing. 2 magnificent creatures from another world. And inside his cabin was a princess whose entire civilization had been nearly destroyed. It was insane, all of it. But she was right about one thing. He could not just ignore someone who needed help. "Okay," he said finally. "So what is your plan? You cannot stay hidden here forever. Eventually someone is going to notice a crashed spaceship and 2 dragons in Montana." Lyra had been thinking about that. "I need to contact my people. Let them know I survived. Then I need to reach out to your world leaders. Convince them to help us, and how exactly do you plan to do that?" Jake asked. "Just walk up to the White House and say, 'Hello, I am an alien princess. Please help me fight an evil empire.'" Lyra almost smiled despite the pain. "When you say it like that, it sounds impossible." "That is because it kind of is." Jake turned to face her. "Look, I want to help you, but this is bigger than just you and me. If you reveal yourself to the world, there is going to be panic, fear, maybe violence. Humans do not handle the unknown very well. The Krell are coming," Lyra said firmly. "They will not stop hunting me. And once they find Earth, they will see your people as primitive and weak. They will conquer this world without a second thought. Unless we stand together." Jake rubbed his face with both hands. This was way above his pay grade. He was just a medic who wanted to be left alone. But fate or destiny or whatever you wanted to call it had dropped the situation right in his lap. "All right," he said. "First things first. Can you contact your people from here? Do you have some kind of communication device on your ship?" "Yes," Lyra said. "There is a distress beacon. If I can reach the ship and activate it, my people will receive the signal. But I do not know if I can walk that far yet." "You cannot," Jake said firmly. "You are still recovering. Give it a few more days. Then we will go to your ship together and see what we can salvage." Over the next 3 days, Lyra's strength returned rapidly. Her biology was different from humans, but similar enough that Jake's medical treatment had worked. The wound was healing cleanly with no signs of infection. The poison was completely purged from her system. During those days, Jake and Lyra talked for hours. She told him about her world, about the crystal cities that floated above silver seas, about the forests where trees sang in the wind, about the culture of her people who valued honor and wisdom above all else. Jake told her about Earth, about the diversity of nations and cultures, about human history both beautiful and ugly, about the wars and conflicts that still divided people, but also about the capacity for compassion and heroism that existed in ordinary people. Lyra found herself fascinated by this human. He had been a soldier and a healer. He had saved countless lives but also carried the weight of those he could not save. He had retreated from the world because he was tired of violence. Yet when she needed help, he had not hesitated. On the 4th day, Jake declared her fit enough to travel. They made their way through the forest with Ember and Frost following overhead. The dragons had warmed up to Jake over the past days. Frost even allowed him to touch her scales. Ember was still cautious but no longer threatened to incinerate him. When they reached the crash site, Lyra felt a pang of sadness. Her ship was completely destroyed. The hull was cracked open like an egg. Systems were burned out, but Jake helped her climb inside, and together they searched for anything salvageable. They found the distress beacon intact in a shielded compartment. Lyra activated it with trembling hands. A soft blue light pulsed from the device. The signal was now traveling through space faster than light. Her people would receive it within hours. She also found her father's crown. It had been in a secure vault and survived the crash. The silver circlet was bent and scratched but still recognizable. Lyra held it carefully, feeling the weight of responsibility it represented. She was the last of her line. The future of her people rested on her shoulders. Jake found several data crystals containing information about the Krell Empire, military intelligence, ship designs, strategic weaknesses, everything the Silvermoon Elves had learned during the war. This information could be valuable if Earth decided to help. As they prepared to leave the crash site, a sound made them both freeze. It was the rumble of engines. Not spaceship engines, ground vehicles. Jake pulled out a small device from his pocket and checked it. "We have got company," he said grimly. "Multiple vehicles heading this way, probably military. Someone must have tracked the crash site." The military convoy arrived within minutes. 3 armored vehicles and 2 helicopters. Soldiers poured out with weapons raised. Jake immediately stepped in front of Lyra with his hands up. Behind them, Ember and Frost rose to their full height, their scales glowing with power. "Stand down," a voice called through a megaphone. "This area is now under military jurisdiction. Step away from the alien and no one gets hurt." Jake did not move. "These are good people," he shouted back. "They are not a threat. The woman is injured and seeking refuge." A man in an officer's uniform stepped forward. His name tag read Colonel Hayes. "We will determine if they are a threat. Now step aside, civilian." Jake looked at Lyra. She was tense and ready to run. The dragons were seconds away from attacking. This situation could turn deadly very fast. He had to de-escalate before someone did something stupid. "My name is Jake Murphy, former combat medic. Served 12 years. I found this woman dying 4 days ago and saved her life. She is a refugee fleeing genocide. She came here seeking help, not to cause trouble." Colonel Hayes studied him carefully. "That does not change the fact that she is an alien on United States soil. She needs to come with us for questioning." "And then what?" Jake demanded. "You lock her up in some underground facility? Run experiments on her? She is not a lab rat, Colonel. She is a person. How do we know she is not dangerous? How do we know this is not an invasion?" Jake gestured at the destroyed ship. "Does that look like an invasion force to you? She crash-landed here running from enemies. Her people were nearly wiped out. She needs protection, not interrogation." The colonel hesitated. He could see the logic in Jake's words, but he also had orders. The president and joint chiefs needed to know about this. First contact with alien life was the biggest event in human history. They could not just let it happen in a Montana forest without oversight. Lyra stepped forward. Her voice was clear and strong despite her injuries. "I am Princess Lyra of the Silvermoon Elves. I came to your world seeking allies against the Krell Empire. My people have been nearly destroyed. I carry information about a threat that will eventually reach Earth. I am willing to speak." With your leaders, but I will not be imprisoned. The soldiers shifted nervously at the sight of her silver skin and glowing eyes. Some aimed their weapons at the dragons, who responded with warning growls. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Colonel Hayes made a decision. Lower your weapons, he ordered his men. Then he looked at Lyra. Your Highness, I need to report this to my superiors. They will want to meet with you. But I give you my word that you will be treated with respect as a diplomatic guest, not a prisoner. Jake put a hand on Lyra's shoulder. It is your call. Lyra considered her options. She could run, but where would she go? She could fight, but that would make enemies of the very people she needed as allies. Or she could trust that not all humans were like Jake Murphy, but enough were that they would do the right thing. I will come with you, she said. But Jake comes with me, and my companions stay free. The dragons? Hayes looked at Ember and Frost doubtfully. Ma'am, those creatures are dangerous. They are intelligent beings and my friends, Lyra said firmly. They go where I go, Hayes rubbed his temples. This was going to be a nightmare to explain. Fine, but they stay outside and under supervision. The convoy made its way back to a nearby military base. Jake rode in the lead vehicle with Lyra, while Ember and Frost flew overhead. Soldiers in the other vehicles kept weapons ready, but no one fired. The dragons made sure of that by staying close and visible. At the base, they were taken to a secure building. Lyra was given a comfortable room with medical facilities. Jake was allowed to stay with her. The dragons were provided a large outdoor area with food and water. Guards watched them from a distance with a mixture of fear and awe. Within hours, representatives from the government arrived. Senators, scientists, military brass, intelligence officers. They all wanted to see the alien princess. To verify that this was real, Lyra sat in a conference room and told her story again, this time to dozens of people who interrupted constantly with questions. She explained about her people, about the war, about the Krell Empire, and their brutal expansion across the galaxy. She showed them the data crystals containing strategic information. Jake watched from the corner of the room. He could see the wheels turning in the minds of the politicians and military leaders. Some were frightened. Some were excited about the potential for new technology. Some were calculating how this could be used for political advantage. But there were also those who listened with compassion, who understood that Lyra was not just a source of alien tech, but a person who had lost everything. These were the ones who asked about her people, about the survivors, about what could be done to help. The meeting lasted for hours. Finally, the president himself arrived via video conference. He looked tired but determined. Princess Lyra, he said, what you have told us is difficult to process. But if what you say is true, then Earth faces a threat we cannot ignore. It is true, Lyra said. The Krell will come. Perhaps not today or tomorrow, but they will come. They believe might makes right. That primitive species should be conquered or destroyed. Earth is primitive by galactic standards. You will be a target. The president was quiet for a moment. What do you need from us? Lyra had prepared for this question. I need 3 things. First, asylum for myself and any other Silver Moon refugees who reach Earth. Second, I need help contacting the surviving members of my people scattered across space. Third, I need you to begin preparing for the possibility of war. That is a tall order, the president said. We cannot make promises without more information. But I'm willing to offer temporary asylum while we learn more about the situation. As for military preparation, we will need to see evidence of this threat before committing resources. Lyra pulled out one of the data crystals. This contains everything my people learned about the Krell, their military strength, their weapons, their tactics. Study it. Then tell me if you think Earth can stand alone against them. The crystal was taken away for analysis. The meeting ended with Lyra being assigned official diplomatic status. She would be allowed to stay at the base with access to communication equipment to reach her people. Jake was cleared to remain with her as her liaison and advisor. That night, Jake and Lyra sat outside near where the dragons rested. The stars were bright in the clear Montana sky. Somewhere out there among those stars were the remnants of Lyra's people, and somewhere out there were the Krell hunting for survivors. Do you think they will help? Lyra asked quietly. Jake looked at her. I think some of them will. Not everyone. There will be resistance and fear and politics. But there are enough good people in the world who will do the right thing when it matters. You have a lot of faith in your species. I have faith in individuals. Jake corrected. People can be selfish and cruel, but they can also be brave and compassionate. You just have to give them the chance to be heroes. Lyra smiled. You sound like my father. He believed that too. That was why he fought the Krell even when it seemed hopeless. He believed that good people would eventually stand together against evil. He was right, Jake said. And we are going to prove it. Over the next week, more information came to light. Analysis of the data crystals revealed that the Krell Empire was massive. They had conquered dozens of star systems. Their military was advanced and ruthless. If they decided to attack Earth, it would be a slaughter. But the data also showed weaknesses. The Krell relied heavily on brute force. They were not innovative or adaptive. Their ships were powerful, but their tactics were predictable. A well-prepared defense with knowledge of their strategies could hold them off. The president called another meeting, this time with world leaders from every major nation. Lyra presented her case to all of them via secure video conference. She showed them what the Krell had done to her people. The destroyed cities, the mass graves, the refugees fleeing with nothing. The response from the world leaders was mixed. Some nations immediately pledged support. Others demanded more proof. A few dismissed Lyra's warnings as either a hoax or an exaggeration. But one thing became clear. Humanity was divided on how to handle first contact. Jake watched the debates on television from the base. Politicians argued about the costs of preparing for a threat that might never come. Military experts questioned whether alien technology could be trusted. Religious leaders debated the theological implications of other intelligent life. But there were also voices of reason. Scientists who saw the data and understood the danger. Military strategists who recognized that preparation was essential. Ordinary citizens who believed that helping refugees was the right thing to do, regardless of where they came from. Public opinion shifted when Lyra agreed to do an interview. She appeared on a major news network with Jake by her side. The host asked her direct questions, and she answered honestly. She talked about losing her father, about watching her world burn, about the desperate hope that had brought her to Earth. The interview was broadcast around the world. Billions of people saw the silver-skinned princess with tears in her violet eyes as she described the fate of her people. They saw the dignity with which she carried herself despite everything she had lost. They saw her not as an alien, but as a person who needed help. The next day, donations poured in from around the world. Money to help resettle Silver Moon refugees, volunteers offering to assist in any way they could. Messages of support from ordinary people who wanted their governments to do more. 2 weeks after the crash, Lyra's distress beacon received a response. A Silver Moon scout ship entered Earth's solar system. The crew was cautious, approaching slowly and broadcasting peaceful intentions. They were granted permission to land at the military base. When the ship touched down, Lyra ran toward it with tears streaming down her face. The door opened and 3 elves emerged. One of them was an older male with silver hair and ceremonial robes. He saw Lyra and his stern expression crumbled. "My princess," he said, dropping to his knees. "We thought you were lost." Lyra helped him stand and embraced him. "Commander Talon, how many survived?" Talon's voice was heavy with grief. "Maybe 2,000. Scattered across a dozen systems. We have been searching for you for weeks. When we received your beacon, we came as fast as we could." Jake stood back and watched the reunion. The other elves embraced their princess with obvious relief. These were her people, the survivors of a genocide, 2,000 left from a population that once numbered in the millions. That evening there was a gathering. The Silver Moon survivors met with human leaders to discuss the future. Lyra introduced Jake to her people and explained how he had saved her life. The elves thanked him with deep formal bows. Some had tears in their eyes. Commander Talon addressed the assembly. "We come before you with nothing. Our worlds are gone. Our fleets destroyed. We are refugees seeking sanctuary. In return, we offer our knowledge, our skills, and our loyalty. We will not be a burden. We will contribute to your society and stand with you against any threat." The president stood to respond. "The United States and our allies grant asylum to the Silver Moon people. We will work together to find you homes and help you rebuild your lives. But I must be honest, not everyone on Earth welcomes your presence. There will be challenges ahead, we understand," Lyra said. "We do not expect acceptance to come easily, but we hope that through our actions we can earn the trust of humanity." Over the next months, the Silver Moon refugees began integrating into Earth society. They settled in various locations, always in small groups to avoid overwhelming local populations. They shared their knowledge of science and medicine. They taught human engineers about advanced materials and energy systems. Ember and Frost became minor celebrities. People traveled from around the world to see the dragons. Children drew pictures of them. Scientists studied them with fascination. The dragons seemed to enjoy the attention, though Ember remained protective of Lyra. Jake found himself thrust into an unexpected role. He became Lyra's chief advisor and translator, not just of language but of culture. He helped her navigate human politics and social customs. He explained why some people feared aliens while others embraced them. He was the bridge between two species learning to coexist. Lyra fell in love with Earth despite its problems. She marveled at the diversity of life. The vast oceans, the towering mountains, the billions of humans, each one unique. It was so different from her crystalline homeworld, but beautiful in its own way. She also grew close to Jake. He was unlike anyone she had ever known. Gruff and practical, but with a deep well of compassion. He made her laugh with his dry humor. He challenged her assumptions about leadership and duty. And he never treated her like a princess, but simply as Lyra. 6 months after first contact, the Krell finally came. 3 warships appeared at the edge of the solar system. They did not attempt peaceful communication. They simply began moving toward Earth, broadcasting a message in multiple languages. Surrender the Silver Moon criminals or face annihilation. The world held its breath. Every defense force went on high alert. The Silver Moon refugees prepared to evacuate if necessary. No one wanted war, but no one was willing to hand over innocent people to be executed. Lyra stood in the command center watching the Krell ships approach. Jake was beside her along with Commander Talon and human military leaders. The tension was unbearable. "We will not surrender you," the president said firmly. "Earth does not give up refugees to tyrants." "Thank you," Lyra said quietly. "But I cannot let your world burn for my sake." Before anyone could stop her, she activated a communication channel to the Krell ships. "I am Princess Lyra of the Silver Moon Elves. I will surrender myself if you leave this planet in peace." "Negative," Commander Talon said immediately. "I forbid it." Jake grabbed her arm. "Are you insane? They will kill you. Better me than billions of humans," Lyra said, but the Krell commander laughed over the channel. "Your surrender is meaningless, Princess. This world harbored criminals. They must be punished. We will destroy their cities until they learn their place in the galactic order. That was a mistake." Those words united humanity in a way nothing else could. Every nation on Earth, regardless of past conflicts, stood together against the Krell threat. Military forces coordinated their response. Orbital platforms that had been secretly constructed using Silver Moon technology came online, and thousands of fighters launched into space. The battle was brief but intense. The Krell had expected easy prey. What they found was a species that refused to submit. Human pilots flew with reckless courage. Silver Moon tactical data guided every strike. And the Krell ships designed for overwhelming weaker opponents were not prepared for a coordinated defense. 2 of the warships were destroyed. The 3rd retreated back to hyperspace, broadcasting a warning. Earth was now marked as hostile territory. The Krell would return with greater force. In the aftermath, humanity realized they could no longer hide from the galaxy. They were not alone and they were not safe, but they were also not helpless. The victory proved that with courage and allies they could defend themselves. Lyra stood with Jake on the observation deck watching the debris field where the battle had occurred. Earth had won its first interstellar conflict, but the cost would be measured in years of preparation and sacrifice. "This is just the beginning," she said. "I know," Jake replied. "The Krell will be back, and they will bring friends. Then we will be ready. We will stand together, humans and Silver Moon elves, and anyone else who believes in freedom." Lyra took his hand. "Thank you, Jake Murphy, for saving my life, for believing in my people, for giving us hope." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for reminding us what we can be when we choose courage over fear." Above them, the stars shone brightly, each one representing thousands of worlds, some filled with wonder, others with danger. But Earth was no longer isolated. Humanity had joined the galactic community not as conquerors or victims, but as defenders of the innocent. and the galaxy would learn what happened when humans decided to stand up for what was right. They would learn that this small blue planet produced warriors and healers in equal measure, that humanity would fight to protect the weak and welcome those in need. The Krell Empire had made a grave mistake. They had attacked Earth expecting submission. What they had created was an enemy that would never surrender, and an alliance that would shake the foundations of galactic power. The story of Princess Lyra and Jake Murphy spread across space. Other refugee species heard about the planet that granted sanctuary. Other oppressed peoples learned about the humans who stood against Empire. And slowly a coalition began to form. The galaxy wept not in sorrow but in hope that perhaps the tide was finally turning against tyranny.